The apples hit the floor when she said my name, my real name, the one I didn't know was mine. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as 27 years of careful lies collapsed between checkout lanes 3 and 4. I'd always thought the hollow feeling in my chest was just who I was, not the echo of something stolen. But there she stood, this stranger with familiar eyes, clutching a bag of flour and pieces of my past. Isadora, she called me, her voice breaking on syllables my parents had abbreviated away. I've been looking for you since 1998. And suddenly, I wasn't Isa Wynn anymore. I was someone's missing piece, someone's unforgotten ghost, someone's decades-long search finally ended in the mundane miracle of a grocery run. There's something about Halberton Bay that's always felt both familiar and foreign to me. The salt-tinged air, the way the fog rolls in from the ocean on Tuesday mornings, the rhythm of a small coastal town where everyone seems to know your business before you do. I've lived here most of my life. At least, the life I remember, but I've never quite shaken the feeling that I'm playing a part in someone else's story. My name is Isa Wynn. I work at the Shoreline Gallery downtown, curating local artists and occasionally selling one of my own watercolors when I'm feeling brave. My life is quiet, predictable. Wake up at 6:30, coffee on the porch if weather permits, work at the gallery, dinner alone or with friends, repeat. It's not exciting, but it's mine. Or, at least, I thought it was. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Tuesdays are when I do my grocery shopping, after work, before the midweek rush. Hanson's Market is never crowded then, which is why I noticed her immediately. An older woman, maybe in her 70s, standing in the next checkout line with just a single bag of flour. She had silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, wire-rimmed glasses, and a faded blue cardigan that had seen better days. But it wasn't her appearance that caught my attention, it was the way she was staring at me. Not the casual glance of a stranger, but the intense focus of someone who thinks they've seen a ghost. I looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the tabloid headlines. When I glanced back, she was still watching me. I felt a chill race at my spine despite the stuffiness of the market. The cashier asked if I wanted paper or plastic, and I jumped. "Paper, please," I said, too loudly. I was loading my apples into my reusable bag when I felt a presence beside me. "Excuse me," a voice said, soft but clear. I turned to find a woman from the next aisle standing close, too close. The flour was clutched against her chest like a shield. "Yes," I managed, my throat suddenly dry. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her eyes never leaving my face. "But you look just like my niece." A compliment. That's all it was. Just a sweet old lady making conversation. So why did my skin feel like it was crawling? Oh, I laughed nervously. I have one of those faces, I guess. "No," she said firmly. "You don't." She stepped closer, and I could smell lavender soap. "My niece disappeared in 1998. She would be about your age now." My laugh died in my throat. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely. "That must have been terrible for your family." "It was," she nodded. "We never stopped looking for her." She hesitated, then asked, "Would you mind telling me your name?" It seemed harmless enough. "Isa," I said. "Isavin." The woman's face drained of color. The bag of flour slipped from her grasp and hit the floor with a soft thud, a cloud of white billowing around our feet. "What did you say?" she whispered. "Isa Wynn," I repeated, my heart suddenly pounding. "Why?" Her eyes filled with tears. "My niece's name was Isadora Wynn." The apples tumbled from my hands, red orbs rolling across the grimy linoleum floor. The cashier started to say something about cleanup, but her voice faded into white noise. I stared at the woman, trying to make sense of what she'd said. That's just a coincidence," I stammered. "Isa is short for Isabella. I was adopted. My parents are August and Geneva Wynn." The woman's expression shifted, shock, then something harder. "When were you born?" "I need to go," I said abruptly, abandoning my groceries. I threw a $20 bill on the counter and rushed toward the exit, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright, the air too thick. "Wait," she called after me. "Please, Just tell me when you were born. I pushed through the doors into the parking lot, gulping in the cool evening air. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock my car. As I drove home, my mind raced with questions. It had to be a coincidence. My name, her niece's name. It wasn't that unusual, was it? But deep down, I knew the truth. ISA wasn't short for Isabella. It wasn't short for anything. It was just ISA, the name I'd always had as far back as I could remember. My parents had never mentioned it being short for anything else. By the time I got home, my nerves were frayed. I poured myself a glass of wine and sank onto my couch, trying to steady my breathing. Coincidence. It had to be. But why had I reacted so strongly? Why had I run? I called my best friend, Eloan Parker. We'd known each other since high school, moved back to Halberton Bay around the same time after college. If anyone could talk me down from this ledge of paranoia, it would be Elle. You're overreacting, she said after I'd explained what happened. Old people get confused all the time. She probably mixed you up with someone else. She knew my name, Elle. My exact name. It's not that uncommon a name, Eloan said, but there was something in her voice, a slight hesitation that made me sit up straighter. What aren't you telling me? Nothing, she said quickly. Look, if it's bothering you so much, maybe you should talk to your parents. They'll clear it up. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, nursing my wine. The encounter kept replaying in my mind, details sharpening with each iteration. The woman's hands had trembled. Her eyes had been gray-blue, like the ocean before a storm. And when she'd said my name, my full name, there had been absolute certainty in her voice. Sleep eluded me that night. Around 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and typed Missing Persons 1998 into the search bar. Thousands of results appeared, faces of the lost staring back at me from missing posters and news articles. I refined my search. Isadora, when missing 1998. One result. A small paragraph in the Halberton Herald archives. Local child, Isadora Wynne, age 3, reported missing from family home. Authorities suspect custody dispute. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I was born in 1995. I would have been 3 in 1998. A memory flashed, unexpected, vivid. White walls. A mobile spinning slowly above me. Colorful animals dancing in a circle. Someone crying in the next room. The scent of lavender. I slammed my laptop shut, heart racing. That wasn't my memory. It couldn't be. I grew up in a yellow house with blue shutters, not a white-walled room. My crib had seashells hanging above it, not animals. Didn't it? For the first time in my life, I couldn't picture my childhood bedroom clearly. The details blurred, shifted, rearranged themselves like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. I didn't sleep that night. Morning came with no answers, only more questions. I called in sick to the gallery, something I never did. Instead, I drove back to Hanson's Market, arriving just as they opened. I wandered the aisles, pretending to shop while watching the entrance. Minutes stretched into hours. Just as I was about to give up, there she was, the woman from yesterday, carrying the same empty basket. Our eyes met across the produce section. This time, neither of us looked away. You came back, she said simply. I need answers, I replied. She nodded. My name is Marigold Halley, and I think you're my niece. We sat in the small cafe attached to the market, 2 cups of untouched coffee between us. Marigold's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her worn leather purse and pulled out a small photo album. I've carried this with me every day for 27 years, she said, sliding it across the table. I hesitated before opening it. What would I find inside? What truth was I about to uncover that I couldn't unlearn? The first photo showed a young woman with dark hair like mine, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. That's my sister, Elaine, Marigold explained. Your mother. And you, the day you came home from the hospital. I turned the page. A toddler with wild curls and bright eyes smiled at the camera, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The child was sitting on a worn red tricycle in front of a white house with green trim. That's you on your 3rd birthday, Marigold said softly. 1 week before you disappeared. My fingers traced the outline of the little girl's face. She looked like me, the same eyes, the same dimple in her left cheek when she smiled. But I had no memory of this house, this tricycle, this rabbit. I was adopted, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My parents told me they adopted me from a distant cousin who died suddenly. There was never any mention of this. Marigold's expression hardened. There wouldn't be. The people who took you made sure of that. Took me? The words felt heavy, dangerous. What are you saying? Your mother and father were separated, she explained. Elaine had custody, but your father, he didn't accept the court's decision. He came to the house one night when I was supposed to be watching you. Her voice cracked. I just stepped out for 10 minutes to pick up medicine from the pharmacy. When I came back, you were gone. I shook my head, trying to process what she was saying. If what you're telling me is true, then my adoptive parents. They weren't your father's allies, if that's what you're thinking, Marigold said. The investigation revealed that your father sold you to pay off gambling debts. The people who bought you, they had connections. They made you disappear. The cafe seemed to spin around me. This couldn't be real. My parents, August and Geneva Wynne, were respectable people. August was a former city councilman, now retired. Geneva volunteered at the local hospital. They had raised me with love, with care. Hadn't they? I need proof, I said finally. More than just photographs and stories. Marigold nodded. I've been searching for you for 27 years, Isadora. I have more than stories. As we left the cafe, a strange feeling of being watched crept over me. I scanned the parking lot but saw nothing unusual. Just shoppers going about their day, unaware that my entire world was crumbling beneath my feet. Back at the gallery, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept returning to Marigold's photographs, to the little girl on the red tricycle, to the story of a child stolen and sold. Around noon, I heard the bell above the door chime. I looked up from the reception desk, expecting a customer, but the gallery appeared empty. Hello, I called. Can I help you? No answer. I stood and walked through the main exhibition space, past watercolors of the bay and sculptures made from driftwood. Everything seemed normal until I noticed my office door was ajar. I never left it open. Heart pounding, I approached slowly. Is someone there? A crash from inside, then a figure pushed past me. A man in a dark jacket, face obscured by a baseball cap. He was gone before I could react, disappearing through the rear exit. I rushed into my office. Papers were scattered across the floor, my desk drawers pulled open. What had he been looking for? As I began to clean up the mess, I noticed something on the floor that wasn't mine, a torn photograph. I picked it up, turning it over in my trembling hands. It showed a woman who looked remarkably like me, standing in front of the White House with green trim from Marigold's photos. Across the back, someone had written, Elaine, summer 97. Marigold's sister. My mother? I called the police to report the break-in, but without anything obviously stolen. They didn't seem concerned. Probably just kids, the officer suggested. We'll drive by more frequently for a few days. After he left, I called Aloan. Someone broke into the gallery. I told her. And that woman from the market, Marigold, she showed me photos. Photos of me as a child, with a woman who looks just like me. Silence on the other end of the line. Are you there? I'm here, she said finally. ISA, I think you should be careful. People can fake photos these days. This woman could be scamming you. Why would anyone target me for a scam?
I'm nobody.
I don't know, Aloan said. But something doesn't feel right. Just promise me you'll be careful. Don't give her any money or personal information. After we hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that Aloan was hiding something. We'd been friends for over a decade. I knew when she was holding back. The next morning, I drove to the Halberton County Archives. The building was old and smelled of dust and forgotten things. A bored clerk directed me to the microfiche machines where local newspapers were stored. It took hours of searching before I found it, a small article dated June 17, 1998. 3-year-old still missing. Police continue to search for Isadora Wynn, age 3, missing from her mother's home since June 10th. Initial suspicions of a custody-related abduction have yielded no results, as the child's father, Thomas Wynn, has cooperated fully with authorities. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Halberton Bay Police Department. Below the article was a sketch, an age progression of what Isadora might look like at age 6. The resemblance to my childhood photos was undeniable. My hands shook as I printed the article. Thomas Wynn, not August Wynn. I had never heard of Thomas Wynn. On my way home, I drove past my parents' house. August's car wasn't in the driveway, but Geneva's was. I should stop, I thought. I should confront her with what I'd found. Instead, I drove on, not ready for that conversation. When I got home, there was a voicemail from August. "ISA, honey, I'm going to be out of town for a few days. Business in Portland. Your mother mentioned you've been acting strange. Call us if you need anything." Business in Portland. August was retired. He hadn't had business anywhere in years. That night, my phone rang just after midnight. Unknown number. "Hello." I answered cautiously. Heavy breathing, then a deep voice I didn't recognize. "Stop asking questions. This isn't your story to tell." The line went dead. I sat in the dark, phone clutched in my hand, fear and anger warring inside me. Who had called? How did they know I was asking questions? And what did they mean this wasn't my story? If I wasn't Isadora Wynn, why did I look exactly like her? Why did I have the same name? Why was someone breaking into my office and threatening me? And if I was Isadora Wynn, then my entire life had been a lie. Either way, I needed the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. August was still away, but Geneva was home, tending to her rose bushes in the front yard. She looked up as I parked, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Isa, what's wrong?" I held up the printout from the archives. "Who is Isadora Wynn?" The pruning shears slipped from her hand, landing with a thud in the soft earth. "Come inside," she said, her voice barely audible. In the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd done homework, baked cookies, celebrated birthdays, Geneva's hands trembled as she poured us each a cup of tea. Neither of us drank it. "We saved you," she finally said, tears welling in her eyes. "You have to understand that. We saved you from a terrible life." "By stealing me?" My voice cracked with emotion. "No." Geneva shook her head vehemently. "We didn't steal you. We adopted you." "From who?" "A woman named Elaine Halley? A child who was reported missing." Geneva's shoulders slumped. "You don't understand how things were back then. August had connections. He knew people who could arrange things." "Arrange what, exactly?" "Special adoptions. For couples who couldn't have children but didn't want to wait years for the system to work." She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "We were told your mother was unfit, that you were being neglected. We thought we were giving you a better life." "And you never questioned it? When my face was in the newspaper as a missing child, you never thought something might be wrong?" Geneva's silence was answer enough. "Where are the adoption papers?" I demanded. "ISA, please." "Where are they?" "In August's study. The safe behind the painting." I knew the painting she meant, a dreary landscape of Halberton Bay in winter. I'd always hated it. I marched to August's study, Geneva trailing behind me, protesting weakly. The safe combination was my birthday, or what I'd always thought was my birthday. Inside were financial documents, property deeds, and a worn manila envelope labeled simply, ISA. The papers inside looked official at first glance, letterhead, signatures, stamps. But looking closer, I could see inconsistencies. The adoption agency didn't exist when I searched for it later. The judge's signature was illegible. There was no court case number. These weren't adoption papers. They were forgeries. As I stood there, staring at the evidence of my stolen life, a memory flashed, vivid and terrifying. A woman screaming, being lifted from my bed, a hand over my mouth, dark spaces, floorboards above my head, the smell of earth and fear. Isa. Geneva touched my arm, and I flinched away. Isa, are you all right? Did you know? I whispered. Did you know I was taken? Stolen. No, she said, but her eyes slid away from mine. Not at first. And by the time we suspected, you were ours. We loved you. We couldn't lose you. I backed away from her, clutching the forged papers. I need to go. Where? To that woman? Marigold? Geneva's face hardened. She's been watching you for years, Isa. Following you. August tried to make her stop, but she wouldn't listen. How do you know about Marigold? Geneva pressed her lips together, realizing she'd said too much. How long have you known she was looking for me? I demanded. Please, Isa. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. It won't bring you peace. It will only cause pain. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said, turning to leave. At the door, I paused. When August gets back, tell him I know everything. And I'm not stopping until I find out the truth. I drove straight to Marigold's house, an address she'd given me, just in case. It was the white house with green trim from the photographs, though the paint was faded now, the garden overgrown. She opened the door before I could knock. You know, she said simply. Not everything, I replied, but enough to believe you. She led me inside, to a living room filled with books and plants and memories. Photos covered one entire wall. Pictures of Elaine, of me as a baby, of Marigold herself through the years. Always searching, always hoping. I want to show you something, she said, leading me to a door off the kitchen. It opened to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The basement. You used to play down here when Elaine would bring you to visit. We descended slowly, Marigold flipping on lights as we went. The basement was finished but dated, wood paneling, old carpet, a small playroom area with faded toys still arranged as if waiting for a child to return. This was your favorite spot, Marigold said, pointing to a small table with tiny chairs. You would have tea parties with your dolls. I moved through the space, touching things, trying to connect with memories that seemed just out of reach. A bookshelf held children's books, their spines worn with use. A toy chest painted with flowers. A dollhouse that was an exact replica of the house above us. And then I saw it, a doll with dark hair and a yellow dress, sitting in a rocking chair in the corner. Something about it pulled at me. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. There, stitched into the fabric of the doll's dress, were the initials IW. A sob escaped me, unexpected and raw. I sank to my knees, clutching the doll to my chest as tears streamed down my face. Marigold knelt beside me, her arms encircling my shoulders. You remembered, she whispered. Somewhere deep inside, you remembered. When I could breathe again, Marigold showed me one more thing. A letter, yellowed with age, the handwriting delicate and precise. Your mother wrote this, she explained, after you disappeared, when she knew something terrible had happened. She gave it to me for safekeeping, in case she wasn't around when you were found. What happened to her? I asked, afraid of the answer. Car accident, Marigold said grimly. 6 weeks after you vanished. The brakes failed on a mountain road. The police called it a tragic accident. I never believed that. I read the letter with trembling hands, a mother's desperate words to a child she feared she'd never see again. Elaine wrote of her love, her hope that someday I would know the truth, her suspicion that powerful people were involved in my disappearance. Your father had gambling debts, Marigold explained as I read. He owed money to dangerous men. When he couldn't pay, they suggested another form of payment. Me, I whispered. Marigold nodded. Your father knew people, influential people in Halberton Bay. People who could make problems disappear. Or children. That evening, back in my apartment, I searched through old photo albums August and Geneva had given me over the years. Now that I knew what to look for, the inconsistencies were glaring. No baby pictures before age 3. No birth certificate, only the adoption papers I now knew were forged. No relatives who remembered me as an infant. Between albums, I found something I'd never noticed before, a small address book belonging to August. Most entries were ordinary, doctors, colleagues, old friends. But one page caught my eye. A name was written, then violently crossed out, with the notation beside it. Witness, eliminated? The name, barely legible beneath the angry black lines. Thomas Wynne. My biological father. Later that night, Eloan called, her voice tight with concern. Where have you been all day? I've been trying to reach you. I was with Marigold, I said, too exhausted for pretense. She showed me where I used to play as a child. Before I was taken. Silence, then a heavy sigh. ISA, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've known for a while, but I couldn't. What is it, Elle? My mother, she said quietly. She was a social worker here in the 90s. She helped process your adoption. Unofficially. The betrayal cut deep. You knew? All this time, you knew I was stolen? Not until recently, Eloan insisted. My mother told me last year when she was dying. She made me promise not to tell anyone. She said powerful people were involved, people who could still hurt you, hurt us both.
Who, Elle? Who was involved?
Another long pause. My uncle, for one.
Mayor Parker.
He helped arrange everything. Made the records disappear. Made you disappear.
Mayor Parker.
The man who had handed me my high school diploma, who had given a speech at my college scholarship ceremony, who had always taken a special interest in my potential. There's more, Eloan continued. A network. Children bought and sold to wealthy families who couldn't adopt legally, people with criminal records, histories of abuse, or just those who didn't want to wait. And your mother helped them, I said, anger rising in my throat. She regretted it every day of her life, Eloan whispered. That's why she insisted I befriend you in high school.
To keep an eye on you.
To make sure you were safe. Our entire friendship, a lie. Another piece of my life that wasn't what I thought it was. I have to go, I said, hanging up before she could respond. That night, I dreamed of the red tricycle, of white walls, and a spinning mobile, of a woman singing softly, the scent of lavender surrounding me like a cloud. And for the first time, I saw her face clearly, Elaine Halley. My mother. I woke up knowing two things with absolute certainty. I was Isadora Halley. And the people who had stolen me, who had erased my identity and replaced it with one of their choosing, would finally have to face what they'd done. The truth was coming to light, whether they were ready for it or not. The morning after Eloan's confession, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, focused anger. If what Eloan said was true, if there was an entire network involved in my abduction, then this went far beyond August and Geneva Wynne. This was systematic, organized, and potentially still active. I needed help from someone who understood how to investigate corruption. Someone who wouldn't be scared off by powerful names. Clancy Verrill had been an investigative journalist for the Halberton Herald in the 90s, known for exposing local scandals until a mysterious health issue forced his early retirement. Now he ran a small bookstore on the edge of town, selling used paperbacks and hosting poetry readings on Sunday afternoons. According to local gossip, he'd been silenced by the same people he'd tried to expose. The bookstore smelled of old paper and coffee. A bell jingled overhead as I entered, and a man looked up from behind the counter. Clancy was in his 60s now, with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes behind thick glasses. "Can I help you find something?" he asked. "Information," I said, "about a missing child case from 1998. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "We're about to close for lunch," he said loudly, though it was only 10 a.m. He flipped the sign on the door to "closed" and led me to a back room cluttered with boxes of books. "You're her, aren't you?" he asked once the door was shut. "Isadora Halley." I nodded, not bothering to ask how he knew. "I've been waiting for this day," he said, pulling a locked filing cabinet from beneath a desk. "Hoping for it, honestly."
"Sit down."
"This might take a while." For the next 2 hours, Clancy showed me evidence he'd collected about my case. Interviews, timelines, witness statements that never made it into official reports. Photos of Mayor Parker meeting with August when weeks before my abduction. Records of suspicious payments. All of it pointing to an organized operation. I tried to publish what I found, Clancy explained, but Mayor Parker killed the story. Threatened to destroy the newspaper if my editor ran it. Then I had a heart attack. At least that's what the doctors were paid to call it. Why didn't you go to the state police? I asked. Or the FBI? I tried. Files disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. Eventually, I realized I was putting people in danger just by asking questions. He looked at me intently. Including you. What do you mean? There was a plan to permanently solve the problem. That's a direct quote from a conversation I recorded between Parker and his chief of police. I took what evidence I had and threatened to release it all if anything happened to you. That's when they backed off. Decided to just bury everything instead. A chill ran through me. You saved my life. Maybe. Or maybe I just postponed the inevitable. He pushed a thick folder toward me. This is everything I have. Be careful with it. These people, they're still in power. Still dangerous. Why give this to me now? Because you're asking questions. And if you're going to do that, you should be armed with the truth. He hesitated. Plus, there's something else. Something I discovered but could never prove. I think there were others. Other children. How many? I whispered. At least a dozen over a 10-year period. Children who disappeared from troubled homes, custody disputes, even foster care. All of them placed with wealthy, connected families. All of the records buried or destroyed. I left Clancy's bookstore with the folder hidden in my bag and a new sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us, the stolen children of Halberton Bay. That evening, I received an invitation to the annual Halberton Bay Arts Foundation Gala, a charity event I usually attended as the gallery director. This year's guest of honor, former Mayor Richard Parker. I'd never been able to afford the formal dinner portion before, but this year I splurged on a full ticket. If Parker was involved in my abduction, I wanted to look him in the eye. I wanted him to know that his secret wasn't safe anymore. The ballroom of the Halberton Hotel glittered with chandeliers and wealth. Women in designer dresses mingled with men in tailored suits, all pretending their money made them better than the fishermen and shopkeepers who actually kept the town running. I spotted Mayor Parker immediately. Older now, but still commanding, still surrounded by people eager for his approval. I made my way toward him, heart pounding but step steady. He was mid-conversation when I approached, laughing at something the current mayor had said. Mr. Parker, I interrupted. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Isa Wynn. He turned, the practiced smile freezing on his face as he recognized me. Ms. Wynn. Of course. You run the gallery downtown. Lovely work you do there. Thank you. I understand you knew my parents, August and Geneva? His eyes darted around, looking for an escape. Yes, of course. Fine people. And did you also know a woman named Elaine Halley? I asked, my voice carrying just far enough to make nearby conversations pause. The color drained from his face. I'm afraid I don't recall the name. That's strange, because she was quite well known in 1998. Her daughter disappeared that year. A little girl named Isadora. Complete silence had fallen around us now. Parker's wife touched his arm, concern etched on her face. I think you've mistaken me for someone else, Parker said stiffly. Now if you'll excuse me. No, I don't think I have, I said, stepping closer. I think you know exactly who Isadora Halley is. I think you helped make her disappear. Security was moving toward us now. Two men in dark suits with earpieces, responding to a subtle signal from Parker. You should leave, Parker hissed, before you embarrass yourself further. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed, I replied. But I promise you, by the time I'm finished, everyone in this town will know what you did. What all of you did. The security guards reached us, each taking one of my arms. This woman is unwell, Parker announced loudly. Please escort her out. As they led me away, I called over my shoulder. Ask him about the other children. Ask about the network. Outside, The cool night air hit my flushed face. I'd made a scene, exactly what I'd intended. People would talk. Questions would be asked. The perfect, polished facade was beginning to crack. My phone rang as I walked to my car. It was Marigold, her voice tight with panic. "ISA, the police are here. They're saying I broke into a storage unit at Halberton Self-Storage. They're arresting me."
What?
"That's ridiculous." "Unit 447, she said quickly, before the line went dead. I drove straight to the police station, but they wouldn't let me see her. "Processing," the desk sergeant said with a bored expression. "You can bail her out in the morning." I spent a sleepless night researching Halberton Self-Storage. The facility had been owned by the Parker family since the 1980s. Unit 447 was in the climate-controlled building, reserved for long-term storage of sensitive materials. At 9 a.m., I paid Marigold's bail, a surprisingly high amount for a simple trespassing charge. She looked exhausted as she emerged from the holding area. "What happened?" I asked as we hurried to my car. "I've been watching that storage unit for years," she explained. "Richard Parker visits it every month, always alone, always after hours. I tried to get in once before, about 10 years ago, but the security was too tight. Yesterday, I saw them changing the locks. I thought it might be my only chance." "What's in there?" "I don't know. I triggered an alarm before I could get inside. But whatever it is, Parker doesn't want anyone to find it." We drove to a diner on the outskirts of town to plan our next move. If the storage unit contained evidence about the trafficking network, we needed to see it. But after Marigold's arrest, security would be heightened. "We need a distraction," I said finally. "Something to draw attention away from the storage facility." That's when my phone rang, Eloan. "I heard what happened at the gala," she said without preamble. "My uncle is furious. He's called an emergency meeting with all the old board members." "Good," I said coldly. "Let them panic. ISA, you don't understand. These people, they'll destroy you to protect themselves." "Like they destroyed my mother?" Silence on the line. I need to know whose side you're on." A long pause then. "You deserved better than this. All of you did. All of us. The others. The ones like you." Her voice broke. "I can help. I have access to sealed court records through my law firm. Records my uncle thinks were destroyed years ago." That night, while Richard Parker and his associates gathered at his home to discuss damage control, Eloan leaked decades of sealed family court records to Clancy Viral. And while the town's attention was focused on the bombshell revelations beginning to circulate online, Marigold and I broke into Unit 447. The lock was simple enough to pick with tools borrowed from Clancy's investigative days. Inside, we found stacks of dusty boxes, each labeled with a year and a case number. In the corner stood a filing cabinet filled with surveillance tapes, adoption papers, and photographs. Dozens of children, including me, documented like inventory. Most chilling was a ledger containing names, dates, and amounts, children sold to the highest bidders. Some names I recognized, children who had moved to town suddenly during my school years. Children who, like me, never quite fit in. One name jumped out at me. Miles Thorne. I knew that name, not from memory but from dreams. A little boy with serious eyes who appeared in my nightmares, always warning me about monsters in the shadows. According to the ledger, Miles had been placed with the Thorne family in Seattle. He would be my age now. We photographed everything, careful not to disturb the arrangement of the boxes. This evidence needed to reach the right hands, not local authorities who might be compromised, but state police, FBI, journalists who couldn't be bought. Clancy was waiting when we returned to his bookstore, his eyes bright with vindication. "It's happening," he said, turning his laptop to show us a breaking news alert. Eloan's documents are already making waves. 3 former Halberton officials have been named in a state investigation into corruption and child trafficking. "It's not enough," I said, showing him the photos from the storage unit. "We need to go bigger." The next day, Clancy published an explosive exposé on his long-dormant blog, detailing the network of child trafficking in Halberton Bay. Within hours, it had been picked up by national news outlets. By evening, the FBI had arrived in town, and Parker's home was surrounded by agents in dark suits. But as the story broke wide open, I realized the danger was only increasing. Someone had followed me home from Clancy's. My apartment had been searched, nothing obvious taken, but things moved just enough to send a message. "We know where you are." That night, a brick came through my window with a note attached. "Stay buried, ISA." Too late for that, I thought. I was done being buried. The FBI moved quickly once they had the evidence from Unit 447, arresting Richard Parker, the former police chief, and several other conspirators within days. August returned from his mysterious business trip to find federal agents waiting at his home. Geneva was taken in for questioning the same day. I watched from a distance as my adoptive mother was escorted to a waiting car, her face crumpled with fear and shame. Despite everything, some small part of me ached for her. She had been my mother for 27 years, regardless of how our relationship began. The preliminary hearing was held in the county courthouse, a grand old building where I'd once gone on a school field trip. I sat in the back row, Marigold beside me, as Geneva took the stand. "Did you know the child you adopted as ISA when had been abducted from her biological mother?" the prosecutor asked. Geneva's hands twisted in her lap. "Not at first," she said, her voice barely audible. "August handled everything. He told me it was a private adoption, that the mother was unfit." "And later? When did you learn the truth?" "When I saw the missing person report in the newspaper." A tear slid down her wrinkled cheek. I confronted August. "He said it was too late, that we'd be implicated if we came forward. He said he'd hurt ISA if I told anyone, that he hadn't paid all that money for nothing." A murmur ran through the courtroom. I felt sick, remembering the father I thought I'd known, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had cheered at my graduations, who had called me princess well into my 20s. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "we request Mr. Wynn be brought in to respond to these allegations." August was led in, handcuffed, his once imposing frame now hunched and defeated. Unlike Geneva, he showed no remorse. He refused to speak, invoking his Fifth Amendment rights for every question. His silence said everything. The case expanded as more evidence came to light. The ledger from Unit 447 led to investigations across multiple states, identifying dozens of children who had been trafficked through the Halberton network over a 20-year period. Some were now adults like me, living lives built on stolen identities. Others had vanished completely, their fate unknown. Among those found was Miles Thorne, now Miles Kelsey, living in Portland. When the FBI contacted him about the case, he asked to meet me. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, two strangers connected by a shared trauma. Miles was tall and thin, with the same serious eyes I remembered from my dreams. "I used to see you," he said after our awkward introductions. "In my nightmares. A little girl with dark hair, crying for her mother." "I saw you too," I admitted. "A boy warning me about monsters. They kept us in the same house before they placed us," Miles explained. "A transition house, they called it. We were there for almost a week together. You were so scared. I promised I'd protect you. But they separated us." He nodded. "Different buyers, different prices. I went to a family in Seattle first, then Portland when the heat got too close." "Were they kind to you?" I asked hesitantly. "Kind enough," Miles said with a shrug. "They wanted a son to continue the family business. I was inventory, not a child. What about you?" "I was loved," I said, the realization both comforting and painful. Conditionally, perhaps, but loved nonetheless. As the investigation continued, media attention intensified. My face was everywhere, on television, in newspapers, online. Reporters camped outside my apartment, hoping for a statement from the woman who brought down the Halberton trafficking ring. Privacy became a distant memory. The one bright spot came when the court ordered DNA testing to confirm my identity. The results were definitive. I was Isadora Halley, daughter of Elaine Halley and Thomas Wynn. Marigold wept when she saw the results. "I always knew," she said, squeezing my hand. From the moment I saw you in that grocery store. A mother knows her child, and an aunt knows her niece. The preliminary hearings gave way to formal charges, and eventually to trials. Richard Parker was the first to be convicted, sentenced to 20 years for his role in the trafficking network. August received 15 years for child abduction and falsification of records. Geneva, in exchange for her testimony, received 5 years probation. Through it all, I sat in courtrooms, giving statements, reliving trauma, becoming a symbol rather than a person. My identity, my real identity, became public property, dissected and analyzed by strangers who thought they knew my story. After Parker's sentencing, I visited Marigold at her home. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the weight finally lifting from her shoulders. "I failed you," she said suddenly as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "I stepped out for 10 minutes. 10 minutes was all it took for them to steal your life." "You didn't fail me," I said, taking her weathered hand in mine. "You never stopped looking, never stopped believing. How many people would have given up after a year? 5 years? You searched for 27 years. And I found you standing in a grocery line," she said with a sad smile. "Life has a strange way of coming full circle. The last person I needed to face was August. I had avoided visiting him in prison, but as the trials concluded and the media frenzy began to die down, I realized I needed closure. The visiting room was stark and impersonal, with hard plastic chairs and a table bolted to the floor. August looked older than his 65 years, his once immaculate appearance now reduced to a prison jumpsuit and institutional haircut. "I didn't think you'd come," he said as I sat across from him. "I almost didn't." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 27 years of lies between us. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why me?" August studied his hands. "You were available. The right age. The right product for the right buyer." "I was a child," I said, my voice tight with anger. "Not a product. To me, you became a child," he said. "My child. I know you won't believe this, but I did love you, ISA. My name is Isadora," I said firmly. "And love doesn't steal children from their mothers." August had no response to that. "I'm not here for an apology," I continued. "I'm here to tell you that you don't own my story anymore. You don't own me. I'm taking back what you stole." I stood to leave, but August called after me.
Isadora.
"There's something you should know. Your birth father, Thomas. He's still alive." I froze. "Where?" "Prison."
Different one than this.
"He's been there since 2002. Armed robbery." One more piece of the puzzle, one more complication in my already tangled history. I nodded once in acknowledgement, then walked away without looking back. After the trials ended, I found I couldn't stay in Halberton Bay. The town held too many ghosts now. Around every corner was a reminder of lies, of complicity, of a community that had watched a stolen child grow up and said nothing. I sold the gallery to a young artist with dreams of revitalizing the local art scene. The proceeds, combined with a modest settlement from the civil suit against Parker's estate, gave me enough to start fresh somewhere new. Marigold and I chose a small town on the Oregon coast, far enough from Halberton Bay to escape its shadows, but close enough to the ocean that it still felt like home. We bought a little blue house with a garden where Marigold could grow her herbs and flowers. "It's not the same as before," she said as we unpacked boxes in our new living room, "but maybe that's good. We're not the same either." In our new town, no one knew our story. We were just the aunt and niece who'd moved in from out of state. Nothing remarkable, nothing newsworthy. The anonymity was healing. Through a support group for adult survivors of abduction, I met others who understood the peculiar grief of lost identity. Some had known they were taken, living with the trauma consciously. Others, like me, had discovered the truth later in life, forcing them to reconcile their happy memories with the knowledge that those memories were built on someone else's pain. Miles visited often, driving down from Portland for long weekends. We pieced together our shared past, filling in gaps in each other's memories. He remembered the transition house better than I did, a suburban home with blackout curtains and locks on the outside of the bedroom doors. They kept us drugged most of the time, he explained as we walked along the beach one gray afternoon. That's probably why your memories are so fragmented.
Not all of them, I said.
I remember you telling me to be brave, that it would be okay. He smiled sadly. I was 7. I had no idea if it would be okay. I just couldn't bear to see you cry. Our friendship grew from the ashes of our shared trauma. Not romantic, but something deeper. Siblings of circumstance, bound by secrets only we understood. A letter arrived from Aloan 3 months after I left Halberton Bay. Inside was a handwritten apology and a check for a substantial amount, her inheritance from her uncle's estate, which she was dividing among all the identified victims. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote, but I hope you know I did what I could when I could. Be well, Isa. Or Isadora, whoever you choose to be now. I put the letter away without responding. Some wounds were still too fresh, some betrayals too deep. Perhaps someday I would find it in me to forgive Aloan for her silence, but not yet. Therapy became a lifeline as I worked through the complex tangle of emotions: grief for the mother I never knew, anger at the people who stole me, confusion about my feelings toward Geneva and August, who had been loving parents despite how our relationship began. During one session, I had a breakthrough about the lullaby that had haunted my dreams, fragments of melody that felt both familiar and foreign. My therapist suggested music therapy, and with the help of a specialist, I reconstructed the song note by note. When I played it for Marigold, she broke down crying. That's Elaine's song, she said through tears. She made it up just for you. She sang it every night when she put you to bed. Some piece of my mother had stayed with me all along, buried deep but never truly gone. Marigold changed too as the months passed. The desperate tension she had carried for decades gradually eased. The constant vigilance gave way to moments of peace, even joy. I used to wake up crying, she confessed one morning over coffee. Every single day for 27 years, I'd wake up and remember you were gone. Now I wake up and you're here. Sometimes I still can't believe it. I began writing down my story, not for publication, not yet, but for myself. I titled it The Girl in the Checkout Line, chronicling everything from that first encounter with Marigold to our new life on the Oregon coast. Writing became a way to process, to reclaim the narrative that had been taken from me. Miles read each chapter as I finished it, offering insights from his own experience. You should publish this someday, he said after reading the final pages. Not for fame or money, but because there are others out there who still don't know who they really are. Your story could help them find their way home. Home. Such a complicated word now. Was home Halberton Bay, where I'd grown up? Marigold's white house with green trim, where I'd spent my first 3 years? Or was it this new place we were building, free from the weight of the past? On the anniversary of my reunion with Marigold, 1 year since that fateful day in Hanson's Market, I woke from a dream so vivid it left me breathless. I was a child again, riding a red tricycle in front of a white house. The sun was warm on my face, the world simple and safe. In the dream, I turned to look behind me, expecting to see the shadows that had haunted my nightmares for years. Instead, I saw only light and a child, myself, smiling back at me. I wrote the dream down in my journal, the final entry in my chronicle of rediscovery. Below it, I added the words that had become my mantra, my declaration of selfhood. I am Isadora Halley. I was taken, but now I have taken myself back. And for the first time since learning the truth about my past, I believed it completely. What pieces of yourself might be waiting to be reclaimed, hidden in plain sight all along? If Isadora's journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share for more stories that explore the hidden depths of identity and the courage it takes to face the truth.